It's amazing how much attitude can be packed into just a word or two. Seriously, we're not just talking about boring grammar today. We're talking about verbs that carry a speaker's true feelings, from super strict commands all the way down to gentle suggestions. So let's dive into the world of modal verbs. Just look at these two sentences: must not and don't have to. At first glance, they look kind of similar, right? But their meanings are on completely different planets. One is an absolute non-negotiable rule. The other, it's just an option, no pressure at all. And this right here, this is one of the biggest points of confusion for English learners, and we are going to clear it all up today. So, how do we get a handle on all this? Well, the trick is to stop thinking of these as just a random list of words and start seeing them on a scale. And to do that, we're going to use this really simple but powerful idea, the ladder of necessity. It's the perfect way to visualize the exact level of pressure or freedom that someone's trying to communicate. Okay, before we start climbing that ladder, let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What are modals anyway? Basically, they're these little helper verbs that you add to another verb to give it some flavor, some attitude. They show whether something is a hardcore obligation, some friendly advice, or just a casual suggestion. And here it is. This is the big idea in one picture. Welcome to the ladder of necessity. You can see it goes from 100% right at the top, we're talking absolute gotta-do-it rules, all the way down to 0% at the bottom, where things are totally optional. Let's work our way down this thing step by step. Let's start right at the top, okay? We're at 100% necessity. This is the heavy hitter territory. This is where we find the words we use for laws, for rules, and for really, really strong obligations. When you're up at this level, there is zero wiggle room. These modals tell you about an obligation that you just can't get out of. Think of a sign that says, employees must wash hands, or your boss saying, you have to finish this report by Friday. No excuses. Now, what's really cool here is that we have a few different tools for the same job. Must sounds a little more formal, kind of official. Have to is your everyday workhorse. It works in pretty much any situation. And have got to, which you'll usually hear as gotta, that's what you say when you're just talking with friends. Same strength, just a different vibe. All right, everybody, lean in. Seriously, this next part is probably the single most important takeaway of this entire explainer. We are getting to the heart of that must not versus don't have to confusion. This is the critical difference between something being totally forbidden and just being optional. Just let that sink in for a second. When they're positive, must and have to are basically twins. But when you make them negative, whoa, they shoot off to complete opposite ends of our ladder. And getting this difference is an absolute game changer for your English. And here it is, crystal clear. Must not is a giant red stop sign. It means something is prohibited. It is 100% necessary that you don't do it. You must not smoke here, end of story. But don't have to? That means there is zero obligation. You don't have to pay. It's not required. It's totally your choice. One is a brick wall, the other is a wide open door. And hey, quick side note on the past tense. If you want to say something wasn't necessary back then, you just use didn't have to. Like, you didn't have to bring a gift. It means it wasn't required, but hey, you did it anyway, and that was awesome of you. Okay, so we've covered the extremes, right? 100% and 0%. Now let's move into that interesting middle ground on the ladder. This is the world of advice, expectations, and gentle suggestions. These aren't strict rules, but they're still pretty important. You can almost feel the pressure dropping with each step down, can't you? We start up high with had better, which is basically a warning, like you'd better not be late or else. Then it softens a bit to should and ought to for good advice. Down another step is be supposed to, which is all about what's expected of you. And finally, we land on the softest level with could and might. These are just friendly, no pressure ideas. Here's another really key point. When you're giving advice for right now or for the future, you just use a simple modal like should. But when you're looking back at the past and you're talking about something that was a good idea, but whoops, it didn't happen, that's when you use should have. We should have invited Jim carries this little bit of regret, this feeling that we missed an opportunity. Okay, so we've got the meanings, we've got the grammar down, but how do people actually say this stuff in a real, fast-moving conversation? Let's step away from the textbook for a minute and talk about how these modals really sound out in the wild. You see, when people talk fast, These words and phrases tend to get, well, kind of squished together. They get reduced. And knowing these reductions is so important for understanding native speakers and, of course, for sounding more natural yourself. Let's just run through the common ones. Have to almost always becomes have to. Got to turns into gotta. When we're talking about the past, should have sounds a lot like shoulda, and could have sounds like coulda. Ought to becomes oughta, and supposed to gets shortened all the way down to supposed to. Start listening for these, and I promise you'll hear them everywhere.
Now, a super important tip about writing, these spoken forms like have to and gotta, they're for speaking, not for your formal papers or work emails. You can use contractions like should've or could've if you're writing dialogue for a story, but for anything professional, you've got to stick to the full forms.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? It all comes back to our ladder. When you need to express yourself, just think, where on that ladder does my message fit? Am I giving 100% command, 50% solid advice, or maybe just a 10% gentle suggestion? Choosing the right modal is really all about choosing the right attitude.
And there you have it. We have gone all the way down the ladder, from absolute unbreakable rules to completely open options. So I'll leave you with this question. Now that you know the attitude behind each of these words, which modal should you go practice first? Thanks so much for tuning in.